Hey y'all, long time no see. In today's video, I am going to be sharing the best baked spaghetti recipe that I have ever had. This is not my recipe. This is coming from Maria at deepfriedhoney.com. I will, of course, have a link to her recipe down below in my description box. That way you can easily get to it and either screenshot it, print it out, whatever you want to. But mainly, I just want to be sure that she gets the credit she deserves for creating this amazing recipe. So a little bit of a backstory on how I stumbled across this recipe. I was really wanting to make something special for Josh and I's wedding anniversary, and right about the same time that idea popped in my head, I was scrolling through TikTok and her baked spaghetti popped up on my For You page, and it looked divine. Like, I will also leave a link to her TikTok in my description box so that you can go and see for yourself, but it just really stood out to me, and I just knew that it would make for the perfect anniversary dinner. So I'm so glad that I made it, because like I said, it was absolutely phenomenal. And I feel like spaghetti is a really common dish in most households. It tends to be a favorite, especially with kids. It just seems to be something that almost everyone loves. So this is a great way to spruce it up, and I just thought that it deserved a whole video to itself. And that kind of leads me to my next point. I have been thinking about starting a new series. I would call it the Special Dish series. And that would be geared more towards those recipes that are more time consuming. I feel like my What's for Dinner videos are leaned more towards like easy and simple meal ideas, which I love, but you know, every now and then it is nice to be a little bit extra and a little more fancy, if you know what I mean. So please let me know down in the comments if you think that's a stupid idea to turn this into a series, or if it's something that you would actually enjoy, because your input 1000% matters. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be doing this. So just be honest, I will not get offended. So I believe that is everything I wanted to say. So let's go ahead and jump on into the recipe. I figured I would start this off by showing you the finished product first, that way to hopefully intrigue you to stay and watch this step by step. But like, how delicious does this look? I am so excited to pass this recipe along to you guys. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make the homemade meat sauce. This is the main reason that this recipe is so time consuming, since it does have to simmer for quite a while. But you got to remember, it's not like you're standing over the stove the whole time. Like, you can definitely walk away from this and go about your business and get some things done. It's truly not a big deal. So don't let the cook time prevent you from making this recipe. I highly recommend starting this in the morning when you first get up, and then you can just set it to the side and assemble everything else at dinner time. So to my Dutch oven, I've added in 2 pounds of ground beef. If you don't have a Dutch oven, you could totally just use a regular pot. I'm using 80-20 ground beef. That's just what I normally buy, and that's what I had on hand, but you could go leaner if you wanted to. Also, if you are new here, I don't cook with onions. I pretty much just stick to onion powder, but I did want to throw in that the original recipe did state to cook an onion in with some olive oil and a little bit of salt before adding in the ground beef. So just keep that in mind. Also, it is storming outside, so I'm sorry for any background noise, but I like to season my ground beef when it is about halfway cooked through, and I'm just doing some salt, pepper, and I did do onion powder since I didn't do the actual onion. If you notice, I am touching the top of my pot. Don't be like me, don't do that. Use a pot holder. I'm pretty sure my fingertips are like numb at this point, but those Dutch ovens get extremely hot. But now that my ground beef is fully browned, I'm going to go ahead and drain off that grease. You definitely don't want all of that sitting in your spaghetti sauce. And the way I do that is with a fine mesh strainer over top of a bowl. And then when it hardens, I just toss it out. So back to my pot, I've added in a little bit of olive oil, and I'm throwing in some minced garlic. You could totally mince your own garlic, but I just saved a step and used the stuff in a jar. But I'm going to saute that for about 1 to 2 minutes, and then I'm going to add in about 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. And this is going to really coat that garlic, which is going to help prevent it from burning, since garlic does burn really quick, especially in a Dutch oven. Sauteing the tomato paste like this really does something incredible to a sauce that I can't even explain. It makes such a difference versus like adding it in towards the end. I also do this with homemade vodka sauce, and it's just incredible. So I just cooked that for a couple of minutes as well, and then I added back in my seasoned ground beef, and I am just going to toss this around and make sure that all of that ground beef is coated in the garlicky tomato paste. And then I'm going to add in 2 cans of tomato sauce. These are just the regular 15-ounce size cans, and I'm also going to add in a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Yes, I opened it from the bottom. My can opener was not wanting to work this day for whatever reason. But next, I'm going to add in about a half a cup of water to my can, kind of slosh it around to get all that excess tomato stuff like off the sides. Dump that in, and then I'm going to add in a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce, and I'm also going to add in some balsamic vinegar, just a very small amount. I'm going to get that incorporated real quick, and then I'm going to take you over the spices. Like I said before, the recipe will be linked in my description box if you want to get the exact measurements for these spices, but it's basically a combination of cayenne pepper, Italian seasoning. She used kosher salt, but all I had was sea salt, some red pepper flakes, oregano, and parsley. There was a couple of seasonings that she used that I didn't have, and I didn't want to go and purchase them because I knew that I wouldn't use them that often, so just couldn't justify it. But this was not lacking seasoning at all, so no worries there. I just tossed that in my pot, got that distributed, and now I'm just going to add in a little bit of some fresh basil that I minced up, and then I'm also going to add in the rind of a Parmesan block. These are great to keep on hand after you finish a block of Parmesan cheese. It's great for this purpose and just like soups and sauces in general, so I highly recommend saving those. And then for the last ingredient, I'm just going to add in a little bit of brown sugar. In most cases, when it comes to a tomato-based sauce, you will need some sort of sugar to cut the acidity. So I just got that blended in, and then I'm just going to give it a small taste test to see if I needed to add in any additional salt or sugar, and luckily it was just perfect. So I'm going to add my lid, and I'm going to turn this down to about medium low. I did let this simmer for about 3 hours. I checked it about halfway through, and I'm so glad that I did because it was starting to burn a little bit on the bottom. I have always had that problem with my Dutch oven and like long cook times, so maybe just turn it down a little bit lower than what you would assume medium low is, and you should avoid that problem. But lastly, I'm just going to remove that Parmesan rind, and I'm now left with the most amazing meat sauce that I have ever tasted. The next thing that I went ahead and prepped was the cheeses. So I'm going to be using a pound of mozzarella, some Parmesan, this is the same one that I took that rind off of, and some Romano. Hope I'm saying that right. But I do highly recommend shredding your own cheeses for this recipe. This KitchenAid like shredder attachment has been a game changer. It makes it go so quick. But if you don't have a KitchenAid, there are similar items on Amazon that, can make things go smoother for you. But I've got everything separated into their own bowl, and now I can go ahead and start my bechamel sauce. So to a small saucepan, I've added in 2 cups of whole milk, and I'm going to add in 1 bay leaf. I have this on about medium heat, and I'm just going to let this cook until you can start to see some like little bubbles forming around the sides. You don't want to boil this or anything, but at this point I've turned off my heat. I'm going to add a lid, and I'm just going to take that off the heat. Now to another pot, I'm going to go ahead and melt down 2 tablespoons of butter. Once that's fully melted, I can go ahead and add in my 2 tablespoons of plain all-purpose flour. And then I'm just going to take my silicone whisk, and I'm just going to continue stirring this to ensure that there's no lumps or like any pieces of flour popping through. And I'm going to cook that down for just a couple of minutes. And now I can go ahead and remove my bay leaf from that milk mixture. And I am just going to pour the warmed milk into that butter and flour mixture, and I do have this on about medium heat. I'm going to season it up with a little bit of salt, a pinch of nutmeg. Nutmeg goes great in so many different white sauces, and I'm also going to crack in some black pepper. And I'm just going to let this cook for a few minutes. I honestly think that I did something wrong here because mine barely thickened at all, which in the end it really didn't matter, so oh well. So I took it off the heat, and I've added in a half a cup of Parmesan cheese and a 1/4 cup of that Romano cheese, and I kept on stirring it to try to encourage that cheese to melt, but it never really fully melted. But like I said, didn't really matter in the end. So just going to put my lid on, and that sauce is done. So now I can go ahead and boil up my spaghetti. So I use a full 1 pound box. Always salt your water. I know that when I first started cooking, I didn't really understand why, but it really does like season the noodles so much better if you do it while it's cooking. I also always break my pasta in half. I know that offends a lot of people, but that was just how my parents done it, and I just think it's kind of easier for kids to eat instead of like, super long noodles. But of course, if you want to, just leave it whole. I just went by the directions on the back of the box. I did cook it to al dente because remember, it is going to cook in the oven as well, and you definitely don't want overcooked noodles. So obviously, I'm going to drain my pasta, give it a little shake. There's no need to like run it under cold water or anything. And while that pasta is slightly cooling down in the strainer, I went ahead and whipped up a mixture that the spaghetti noodles are going to be coated in. So to a large mixing bowl, I've cracked in 2 eggs that are at room temperature. Now I'm just drizzling in 3 tablespoons of olive oil, and I'm just going to take my whisk and quickly beat that together. Next, I'm going to generously season this mixture with some garlic salt. I have been loving the one by Laurie's here recently, and just a few turns of some of that freshly cracked black pepper. Now I'm adding in 1 cup of Parmesan cheese and a 1/4 cup of the Romano, and I'm just going to make sure that that cheese is fully coated in that egg mixture. And now I can finally add in my cooked and drained pasta, followed by 1 cup of that homemade meat sauce. And I'm just going to toss all of this together and try my best to get everything coated as evenly as possible. And now it is finally time to assemble this into a casserole. So I'm just greasing a 9x13 casserole dish, and I'm going to ladle in a small amount of that meat sauce on the bottom just to make sure that nothing's going to stick. And I'm going to add down half of my spaghetti noodles, half of my bechamel sauce, half of the mozzarella, and I'm just going to repeat that until I've used up all my ingredients. Now that everything is assembled, I can go ahead and place a piece of greased aluminum foil tightly onto my dish. My oven is preheated to 375 degrees, and I'm just going to pop that in for 15 minutes. Then I'm going to remove the foil and let it finish for a final 25 minutes. And here is what it looked like when I pulled it straight from the oven. If you wanted to cut it into squares and make it look more presentable, definitely let this rest for at least 15 to 20 minutes before you go to cut into it. My kids were screaming by my feet while this was cooking, saying that they're starving. So, of course, I was not going to make them wait. So, here's what it looked like when I immediately served it. This was really heavy compared to that little cheap, flimsy spatula that I was using. But, like, how ooey and gooey does that look? I know for me, I cannot stand like a dry spaghetti or pasta of any kind for that matter. So this definitely was the perfect ratio of like sauce to noodle. Both of the kids cleared their plates, but they did complain that it was just a little bit too spicy for them. This recipe did call for an optional 1 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, which honestly, I believe that's the reason I loved it so much, because I love the kick that it gave. But if you're feeding like younger ones or just anyone sensitive to spice, just keep that that in mind, maybe cut that in half or just leave it out altogether. But we just served it with some cheesy garlic bread. We weren't feeling a salad or anything like that. As you can see, it made a ton. We sent some next door to my in-laws. They really loved it as well. And we were still eating on this for the next couple of days. But yeah, it made for a really nice anniversary dinner. Josh absolutely loved it and really appreciated it. If any of you guys decide to make this, come back to this video and let me know down in the comments what you thought about it. I thought it was super unique compared to like any other baked spaghetti I've ever had. So if you made it this far in the video, I just want to say thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. And I will see you real soon. Bye, guys.